These victims were usually killed by acquaintances, partners, strangers, some of whom have been arrested and some of whom are still at large. All right. Sometimes they fall victim because they're impoverished, they're poor, homeless, or they're a sex worker. So things like that puts the individuals in harm's way. But without further ado, I want to get into the victims from 2021. I hope the video isn't too long, but I'm going to go through all of the victims, all right, all 50. All right, so I want you to hit that like button, subscribe, comment, share the video. This is important information, all right? This is Dr. William James, home of Objective Truth. What up? It's Dr. William James here, reporting to you live, talking to you about the transgender violence myth. The reason I say it's a myth is because it's just simply not true. Okay, this is a part of an agenda, a white supremacist agenda of intersectionality, trying to distract you from, black liberation with the distraction of intersectionality. It's simply just not the case. And I meant to do a report on the violence from 2020, where they said 44 transgender people were murdered, according to the HRC. But I never got the chance to. But after I did my research with that, I arrived at the conclusion that it was a possibility that 16 of the 44 victims were murdered because they were trans. All right, and I say possibility. All right. So out of the 50 victims, 50 trans victims that there were in 2021, I arrived at the conclusion that maybe 20 of them, possibly 20 of them were killed because they were trans, possibly. And you're going to see as I go through the data, the situations that I went through for each one, I arrived at the conclusion simply if the case is unsolved. If the person was murdered and it was unsolved, you don't know who killed the person or why they killed them, I said it's a possibility. So I'm being very lenient and, giving them the benefit of the doubt that it could be something there. And I still only arrived at 20 out of 50, all right? In some cases, it's clear as day that the person was not murdered because they're trans. All right, so let's go through all of these and let's see. So, one of the first people is a transgender woman named 50 Bands, 20-year-old black woman, trans woman, who was shot and killed by the boyfriend. All right, so 50 Bands was not murdered because of being trans, murdered by a boyfriend. So that's a domestic issue. All right, but this is reported as simply trans violence. And because this is a black trans woman, they like to say how black trans women are, the highest statistic to be murdered. 80% of the trans people murdered are trans black women and things like that. So they're reporting stuff like this when someone was murdered by their partner in a domestic dispute, which is not honest. It's not, not dealing with integrity. It's a false narrative when you have cases like that you just report to people that trans people are being murdered. You're not providing a context that they might be being murdered by a loved one or a family member or the person that they're in a relationship with. But I'll continue. Okay. Next, you have Alexis Bratton, 44 years old, trans woman, black trans woman, found dead in an apartment. Okay. This is not because this person is trans. There was no forced entry in this case. Chances are this person was murdered by someone that they know. All right. It's in their home. No forced entry. All right. The person is still at large for that murder. But I'm not going to credit that to someone killing you because you're trans. I'll continue. China Carrillo, trans individual, was murdered. Police later identified the murderer as Juan Carter Hernandez, a 33-year-old Hispanic. China Carrillo is also a Latina. Juan Hernandez had been imprisoned before in North Carolina. He had shot his wife, Candace Hernandez, to death at their home in the state of North Carolina in July of 2011. So this person was murdered by someone with a violent history who had several, run-ins with the law and was just a violent individual. So, he killed his own wife and he was, violent towards other people. So you can't then say that he was violent towards a trans person because they're trans when he was violent towards, what they call cisgender people, or, people who identify with the gender that they were born with. So I would be considered a cisgendered person because I'm a male, I'm a man, and I identify as a male man. Okay? So that's 3 out of the 50 already that were not murdered because they were trans. Okay? Then you have 2 trans siblings, Jeffrey Bright, a 16-year-old trans boy, and Jasmine Kennedy, a 22-year-old trans girl. All right. Both of these individuals were murdered by their mother. Okay. We see cases all the time in the news where, a parent snapped or a child snapped and they might kill their parents, or a parent might snap and kill their own kids. All right. There's cases of them drowning them, starting fires, doing all types of stuff to kill their own children. All right. We can't simply say that this mother chose to kill her kids at age 16 and 22 because they were trans. All right. This is a domestic issue again. This is in-house. They had their own relationship. The mother could have been going through her own things and decided to kill these 2. That's 5 cases out of the 50. All right. So when they report these murders, all right, they're reporting these murders. They're not providing the context surrounding the murders. But I'll continue. All right. Jenna Franks was found stabbed to death. I said that's a possibility that this person could have been murdered because they were trans. But again, there's no context. There's no motive. They don't even have the person who committed the crime. All right. So with cases like this, I'm just giving it the benefit of the doubt. Maybe someone kidnapped this person, killed them because they're trans. But also understand that the objective is to be able to pass if you're trans. So if you are a trans woman, your goal is to look like a woman, a biological woman, a real woman. If you're a trans man, your goal is to look like a trans man. If no one knows you and you're on hormones or you're on testosterone and they don't know you, how could they even know that you are trans? You know what I'm saying? So, but I'll continue. Another trans person that was reported was Diamond Sanders. This person was robbed and shot. Police said this was not a hate crime, not motivated because the person was trans. The person was robbed. It was a robbery gone wrong, which tends to happen. Okay. Moving forward. Rayana Pardue was a Latin trans woman who was hit by a motorist, I believe in Florida. She was hit by a motorist while fleeing harassment. They said that she was being harassed. She stepped out in the street, got hit by a motorist. So I said that this is an incident of possible, person being murdered or harmed because they're trans. Okay, so I'm being as fair as I can. Remember, I only came up with 20 of these cases out of the 50. And notice what I'm labeling possibilities. I want you to notice how lenient I'm being. I'm giving you the context so you can decide for yourself. Jada Peterson was a sex worker who was robbed and killed. A black trans woman, sex worker. All right. And then Remy Fennell is a black trans woman, sex worker, killed by the same person as Jada Peterson a week later. So Jada Peterson was a black trans woman who was murdered April 4th. Remy Fennell was a black trans woman who was murdered April 15th. They were both sex workers, both black trans women. I said that this is a possibility that they were murdered because they're trans. And the reason I said that is because the same person is charged with the murder of both of them. So, maybe this person was targeting sex workers. Maybe this person was targeting black trans sex workers because they were easy to, to get in contact with, to take advantage of, things of that nature. But you also have to take into consideration what their job is to do. Sex work is a dangerous field. When you're a prostitute, you're more likely to have violent crimes happen to you, be robbed, be assaulted, be murdered. All right? Those are the facts. So when you say a black trans woman was murdered and you don't provide the context that they were a sex worker, then it makes it seem like, someone's just out here murdering black trans women when that's not the case. All right? No one deserves to, well, not no one. None of these people deserve to be murdered just because they're trans. Okay? And the reason I put it that way because, I can care less if I know someone is, a child, a molester, a rapist, or things of that nature, or what happens to them. But if these people are just living their life, even if you're a sex worker, even though I may not agree with, certain things morally, they don't need to be murdered because of that. But in this case, they were sex workers. They put themselves in danger with that line of work. All right. So I labeled those two. Those are two crimes that I said possibly were done because they're trans. All right. It could just be the person wanted to take advantage of them, rob them, and, they fought back or whatever. But they were two sex workers. They were murdered. Same person charged with the crimes. Continue. So we're at number 10 with Dominique Luscious. Luscious was killed in an apartment where she had spent the night. An occupant of the unit identified only as told SD. So a witness to the crime they wanted to be identified as SD and not give their name. Said Springfield Police. SD, the witness, said after Luscious woke him up Thursday morning to tell him she needed to freshen up to prepare for a visitor, he went back to sleep but was awakened by gunshots. He saw Luscious lying on the couch and a man standing over her. And then the man went out to his car and drove away. SD took photos of the car, and they were identified in police reports. As JT said, he also heard the gunshots and saw the man drive away. Police arrested Nelson that evening. They said he had sent text messages of a sexual nature to Luscious. After meeting her online, he is being held without bond in Greene County Jail. So again, this is a domestic case where the person has some sort of relationship with the person who ended up murdering her. So Dominique Luscious, a trans woman who was murdered by a man she had, that Dominique had a relationship with. All right. That's no proof that the person was murdered because they're trans. When you know the person personally, you invited them over, and then something went wrong, and then someone died. Number 11, Tiara Banks. Black trans woman murdered in Chicago while sitting in the car. There's no proof of motive. All right. Chicago police are also investigating whether Banks' gender identity was a factor in her death. Another fatal shooting had occurred about half an hour earlier and less than a mile away from where Banks was killed. So common sense will tell you that possibly the murders are connected. All right. Chicago is also called Chirac. They have a high murder rate, and it's been that way for like the last decade. Black men and black women have been getting killed left and right, whether they're trans or not. So you can't just chalk this up as to the person being killed because they're trans, especially when less than 30 minutes earlier and less than a mile away, there was another homicide to a non-trans person. Okay. Next. Natalia Smut, a 24-year-old transgender woman, beloved drag entertainer in North California, was stabbed to death last week. A man who was in a relationship with her has been charged with the murder. So again, this is a domestic dispute. Someone in a relationship with the person, all right? Boyfriends, girlfriends. If you're murdered by that person, that's someone who knows who you are or someone you're in a relationship with, all right? So you can't say that that's transphobia and the person's being murdered because of transphobia and things of that nature, all right? So they're pushing an agenda and they say a certain amount of trans people have been murdered, but they don't provide the context like this. This person was murdered by someone she had been in a long, relationship with. Moving forward. Iris Santos. So I said that this is a possibility that this person was murdered because they're trans, even though there's no motive. Again, when it's open-ended, I'm being fair to say 50-50, possible. It's possible. Is it likely? May not be likely, but it's possible. So she was a 22-year-old Latin transgender woman, was killed in Houston, Texas on April 23rd, 2021. Iris was sitting at a picnic table enjoying a meal when an unidentified suspect approached and shot her. All right. Could that person have noticed? Could it have been a just complete stranger and noticed that the person was trans and shot him because of it? Possible. Could the person have a motive? Could they know the person personally and found them there and shot them? That could also be possible. It could be several things that are possible. Could it have been random? That can also be possible. All right. Again, the news doesn't provide context to the crimes. They just say trans people are being murdered. All right. And I'm going to break down all of the statistics of, murders later. But let's just continue. So, Tiffany Thomas. I said that's a possibility. Tiffany Thomas, the Dallas Police Department is asking for people with information to come forward following the murder of a 38-year-old Tiffany Thomas on April 24th. Police found the 38-year-old black transgender woman dead from a gunshot wound at a car wash on American Way. So this person was at one of those self-service car washes when someone approached and shot her. So could it have been possible because the person was trans? Possible. Kerry Washington, 49-year-old in Clearwater, Florida, has become the latest victim of the epidemic of violence against transgender women. This is from the news report. But this person was not killed because they're transgender. Washington was found dead Saturday morning in the back of an apartment building in Clearwater, according to local media, many of which they claim misgendered her. Police have identified a suspect, Arthur Benjamin Jr., also known as Hadika Shabazz, and issued a warrant for his arrest on charge of first-degree murder. He has an extensive criminal history and was known to the victim. So again, this is a person who had a relationship with their murderer. Most people who are killed by someone who knows them. And this is the case with Kerry Washington. So how can you say the person simply killed them because they're trans? So that's not one of those cases. All right. They didn't provide the context. I'm giving you context. Jahira De Alto was not murdered because she's trans. Died in a violent attack at her home on Dorchester on Sunday. Boston police received a call of a person stabbed on Taft Street. When officers arrived, they found two women suffering from stab wounds, De Alto and Fatima Yassan, who was 28 years old. Yassan's husband, Marcus Chauvin, age 34, was arrested and charged with two counts of murder. Okay, so this trans person was murdered with someone who's not trans, and she was murdered by one of her friend's husband. Okay, they were staying at her house. So again, this is a domestic issue. They were staying at her house. The guy got into it with his husband. The guy got into it with his wife. He killed his wife, and then he killed this trans person who was there as well. So this person snapped, and he killed someone who is trans and someone who's not trans. So then how can you just put it in the news like this person just killed someone because they're trans? All right. So it's like presenting a false narrative that trans people are being murdered because they're trans. But when you look at the context behind it, you see all types of cases. It's a lot of domestic disputes. These are people that they know that they're being killed by, and things of that nature. Again, Whispering Wind Bear Spirit. This is a non-binary indigenous person who was like on a reservation or something like that, was killed. This was supposed to be like a botched robbery by like people who knew the person. So it says Oscar Fink, Spirit's friend, testified Wednesday that the Strada brothers barged into the home unannounced and uninvited the night of the shooting to confront him about stolen marijuana. And Ryan had been accusing the guy of stealing marijuana. Fink testified Wednesday, saying the two had been on good terms until then, which he said was about 2 days prior to the shooting. So Whispering Wind Bear Spirit, this non-binary person, was at the wrong place at the wrong time. This person, or people, because it's a non-binary person, I don't know their pronouns are, but this person was at the wrong place, wrong time. Two brothers barge into their friend's house looking for marijuana that's owed to them, and this person ended up killed. All right, it's not because they were transgender. All right, if I'm in a bank and it gets robbed and I end up getting shot and I die, you can't say the person killed me because I'm cisgender. Or if a trans person is there and they end up dying, you can't say they were killed because they were trans. No, it was a bank robbery. Violence can occur. It's a violent crime. The person's armed. All right, it's danger. But I'll go from there. So, Sophie Vasquez, this is at number 18, was shot at least once, and police found her body in the doorway of an apartment in the 400 building at Atlantic and Brookhaven on May 4th. I said that was a possible case where the person could have been murdered because they were trans. Again, there was no motive. It wasn't released. They haven't found the suspect. So we don't know for sure. I'm just saying it's a possibility. So I want you guys to notice how fair I'm being. Danica Henson, is another person, another trans person who was murdered. Michael Henson is Danica's brother, said Danica was transitioning to become a woman and believes Danica got into an altercation with someone they knew and possibly had a relationship with. No murderer has been brought to justice. So the victim's own brother said that Danica, who was a trans woman, was probably murdered by someone she had in a relationship with. He has reason to believe that, but again, the police have to do their own research. This is a article that came out very soon after the murder, so they don't have any updates yet. I'm not saying that this person was murdered because they're trans when the family members believe it was someone they were in a relationship with. Serenity Hollis is number 20. I said it's a possibility that this person was murdered because they're trans. This is a 24-year-old black trans woman, was shot on May 8th in Albany. It's a majority black city of 73,000 in southwestern Georgia. Her killer has not yet been identified. The killer hasn't been identified. So that's a possibility. Again, a possibility doesn't mean it's likely. And I'm only going to get to 20 people. So Oliver Taylor, a non-binary transgender white female, died in the hospital May 19th, a week after allegedly being kidnapped and shot by an acquaintance. So this person was kidnapped and they were shot by someone that they were friends with. All right, the person is in custody, someone that they were cool with, someone that they knew. Again, that's personal. That's not because you're trans or non-binary. That's Oliver Taylor. All right. So to keep going, Number 22, Thomas Harden, black trans woman killed on May 2nd, 2021. Not because Thomas Harden is trans. Chester County Sheriff's deputies took the suspect, Tyler Terry, age 26, into custody Monday after searching for him for a week. He's accused in at least 4 homicides in 2 states. So this person is a serial killer. This person murdered 4 people. Only one of them were trans. So how can you say that this person is killing people because they're trans when he's murdered 3 other people who aren't trans? All right. So again, context. The news doesn't give you the context. Pro-black white trans woman lived off the grid in California near Mexican border. This person was 21 years old. This is a transgender man and was stabbed to death in California. His death was thought to be a drowning at first. They later found out that this person was stabbed. So this person is a young person who lived off the grid. They lived near the Mexican border in California. Who knows what could have happened? But again, I said this is a possibility just because the person was killed. They're off the grid. They don't know the motive. So I'm saying it's a possibility, being fair. Even though it's not likely, it could be anything. This person is out there, young, 21 years old. Could be anything, literally. But I'll lend it to it's a possibility that the motive could be that the person is, trans or non-binary. Number 24, E.J. Boykin, black transgender man, E.J. Boykin, who also went by the name Nova Watson, was found dead of a gunshot wound. Boykin, 23, was shot June 14th in Lynchburg, Virginia. He was found in the parking lot of a Family Dollar. Police are investigating Boykin's death as a homicide, and they are searching for a suspect. They said they do not believe the shooting was a hate crime, and they think it may have been related to a domestic dispute. A child was at the scene and was not harmed. So this is a case where the person was murdered, and a child was at the scene. And then if you see E.J. Boykin, this is a trans man, he looks like a cisgender man. So I don't know how it would be a random attack in a Family Dollar, store parking lot, and you can't tell that you can't tell the person is trans. So, it will look like a cisgendered person. So I don't know how you can chalk that up to this person being murdered because they're trans. All right. And according to the research, according to the cops doing their investigation, they believe it was a domestic dispute. So that's that. Adeline Evans, black trans woman, was found dead in a canal in Port Arthur, Texas. March, but police announced just this week that they believe her death is a homicide. Survived being shot in 2017. Evans was homeless. So this is a case where I said it's a possibility even though this person had been shot before and this person was homeless. So if you look at the crimes that happen to homeless people, it's probably more likely that something will happen to someone because they're homeless than because something happened to someone because they're trans. All right, people literally set homeless people on fire, murder them. There's, harass them. There's all types of crimes that happen to homeless people. So how can you then say, all right, this person's murdered because they're trans, when they're trans and homeless? Like, there's several variables that come into play. Okay? And then some people try to argue that, they need more supports in place for trans people because, they end up homeless and they end up, without jobs and things of that nature. That's a totally different discussion. This person is homeless. They were murdered. You can't say they were murdered because they're trans. All right. I gave them, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. I said it's a possibility, but again, I'm being very lenient. You see how lenient I'm being, and I'm only going to get to 20. So, Taya Ashton, a black trans woman, one of the ones I said was not murdered because they're trans. A suspect has been arrested in connection with the murder of Taya Ashton, a black trans woman killed in Maryland. Dayallen Price, age 27, was facing charges for this murder. Oh yeah, this is a case where Dayallen Price was in a relationship with Taya Ashton. So again, this is another domestic issue. This is another relationship going wrong, resulting in a murder. Okay? And again, that's a black trans woman. So again, that reports to the data of more black trans people being murdered, but it's a relationship. So what's going wrong in black trans relationships? That's something that they might need to discuss. Okay? But don't try to make it seem like people are just out to get trans people. More specifically, someone's out to get black trans women. No one is out to get black trans women, okay? White supremacy thrives off of having more trans women because then there's less men, all right? They want to emasculate black men. That's been done since the beginning of time. That was done all throughout slavery. Black man emasculation, buck breaking. They do not care that you are black and trans, a trans woman at that. So, anyway. Shy Vanderpump, black trans woman. Saturday night, police arrested Daniel L. Smith, 36, during a traffic stop. He is now charged with the murder and several weapons violations. Smith was the person who reported Vanderpump's shooting to police, according to an affidavit obtained. He said someone had roused him out of the bed, and there had been a shooting at the house. So, again, this is another case where Shy Vanderpump murdered by someone who knew her, or who someone knew the person. Daniel Smith, the person who was responsible for the murder, he called the police and said that, so if you're murdering someone and it's a hate crime, it's not likely, if you're murdering someone and it's a hate crime, it's not likely that you're going to call the police and report the crime that you did to the person because you hate them so much, all right? That's just not likely. But anyway, I'll continue. So, Tiara Marie Lewis, black trans woman, again, a sex worker and drug user trying to ditch the habits. A suspect has been arrested. Dwayne Lunsford is the suspect from Cleveland, was charged with aggravated murder and felonious assault, but pleaded not guilty. So again, this is a case of a sex worker and drug user ditching the habits. That doesn't mean you need to be murdered because you are a sex worker or a drug user. But these things, these actions put you in harm's way. It's just like someone being a gangbanger or someone being a drug dealer, all right? If you're a sex worker and you're a drug user, you're in that world. You're in the streets, okay? So you're subjecting yourself to crime, okay? This is not one of the murders that I credited with someone being murdered because they're trans, or not even, I didn't even give the benefit of this a possibility in this situation. I'll continue. Number 29, Miss Coco, a black transgender woman known as Miss Coco. This person was age 44, was shot to death Saturday at a homeless encampment in downtown Dallas. So again, this is a case of someone being homeless. You can't say that it is because they are trans. Okay, so according to the National Coalition for Homelessness, since 1999, more than 1,000 attacks against homeless individuals have occurred. These attacks occurred in cities throughout our country, in 47 states, and the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. They know no boundaries and are not limited by coast, region, or state. These attacks have permeated every corner of our city, resulting in 312 deaths and 872 non-lethal attacks, including beatings with golf clubs, rape, and setting victims on fire while they slept. The victims have endured humiliations, both great and small. So, look at the number of murders, okay? So it says 312 deaths have resulted since 1999, all right? The HRC just started doing the numbers for trans people in 2013, all right? Pooh Johnson, black transgender woman, has died by violence. Pooh Johnson shot to death in Shreveport, Louisiana on August 23rd. I said that was possible that the person was killed because they're trans. Again, no context, and that wasn't reported, and it wasn't reported as a hate crime, and there's no motive. Number 31, Josiah Monet Smith, black trans woman, age 27. Smith's mom said her daughter was at the motel with a couple of women friends, but was tired and decided to stay in the room while the others went out. When her friends returned, she was dead. So again, this is the case of a black trans woman who was in a hotel and with friends. The friends went out. This one stayed by herself. They said a scuffle occurred at the door. So if you're at a hotel, you're either going to open the door for an employee or someone you know, right? So it doesn't make sense to rule this as a crime that was from someone that the person knew and it wasn't trans. That the person knew and they murdered her because she's trans. All right? You didn't open the door for a stranger. Not at 27 years old. And I would hope not. If the person doesn't work there, then you shouldn't open the door for them. This must have been a low-end motel, for this type of thing to occur. But I suspect that this is someone that the person knew. Breonna Hamilton, black trans woman, age 25, was found by police on Friday in the Grisham neighborhood of Chicago's South Side after sustaining ultimately a fatal gunshot. Hamilton was rushed to a nearby Holy Cross Hospital where was pronounced dead. So I said that this is a possibility, even though, again, this is in Chicago. Murder is going, murders are running rampant in Chicago, high crime rate. I said it's a possibility. Okay, again, likely and possibility. 33. Kier Cartier, black trans woman killed in Texas. When officers around, they found the victim, identified by family as Kier Cartier, had been shot. Police said she was taken to a hospital where she later died. Again, there's not a lot of details on this one, but no motive was released, and there's no proof that the person was killed because they're trans. Number 34, Mel Grooves, black trans man who looked just like a man. On October 11th, Grooves drove himself to Merritt Health Central, a hospital in Jackson, where he lived and collapsed outside his car. He had been shot multiple times. Hospital staff members transferred him to University of Mississippi Medical Center, where he died later in the afternoon. So if you look up Mel Grooves, you're going to see a trans man, black trans man. If you look at the person, you can't tell that the person is trans, all right? If you look up a picture of Mel Grooves, you can't tell that the person's trans. This person's more likely killed because they're black than killed because they're trans. So, again, but this is just reported as a trans person who was murdered and to push the narrative. Royal Poetical Stars, 26 black trans women were fatally shot in Miami Gardens, a city in north central Miami-Dade County, on the afternoon of the 2nd of October. The killer fled in a car, then crashed, and then fled the car on foot. So, again, I said this is a possibility, but again, if you look up the crime in Miami Gardens in north central Miami-Dade County, it's a lot of crime, okay? So who knows what this could have been. But I said it's a possibility. So, very lenient again. Zoella Martinez, white Latina, a suspect is due in court for this murder. Zoella Martinez was found fatally shot in an alley on September 1st. Martinez, age 20, had gone the night before to meet Jakari Rashad Hardy in an attempt to recover $1,100 she believed he had fraudulently withdrawn from her bank account. So Zoella Martinez was not killed because she's trans. Okay? This person was murdered by someone who owed her money. So again, it's personal. Someone she knew. She knew Jakari Rashad Hardy, who, is responsible and arrested for it. Joe Aker, white trans woman, a 26-year-old white trans woman died trying to protect people in shooting at a mall in Boise, Idaho last week. So Joe Aker, a hero for the actions that, the person displayed, but not murdered because you're trans. Number 38, Jesse Hart, a white 42-year-old transgender woman killed in Banks, Oregon. Police found Jesse's body October 2nd in the woods outside of Banks, a small town about 25 miles west of Portland, Oregon. All right, so again, there's no motive here. There's no killer. I said it's a possibility. Ricky Automaro, a.k.a. True Starlet, white trans woman, was shot by a boyfriend. So not murdered because you're trans. Markeisha Lawrence, black trans woman. Markeisha Lawrence, 28, was shot to death on November 4th in Greenville, South Carolina. Lawrence was found dead in her home by family members. It seems she had been in an altercation with one or more people, according to the coroner's office. So I said it's a possibility that this person was murdered because they're trans, but it seems like they knew the person. They're in their home and they're fighting more than one person. So it was either, if we use our common sense, probably a robbery gone wrong, burglary of some sort, or the person knew the people and was attacked by people that they know. There was no signs of forced entry. So, okay. Jenny DeLeon, Latin trans woman, the 25-year-old, was found murdered on November 5th in Sulphur Springs, according to Tampa police. All right, that's all we know. I said it's a possibility that could have been a result of them being transgender. Angel Nara, a 36-year-old black transgender woman, now was shot to death in her home in Pennsylvania on November 11th, 2021. So again, this is someone in their home. So if you're saying that this person was killed because they're trans, the person had to know that a trans person lived there, go to the house, and then kill them because they're trans. So it seems far-fetched. And I even with it being far-fetched, because we don't know who murdered the person and we don't know the motive, I said it's a possibility. With me being this lenient, I only got to 20. All right? There was 50 murders of transgender people that reported that they're pushing this narrative that this is some, crisis of, trans people being murdered, okay? Danielle Thompson, black trans woman, black transgender woman from Memphis, Tennessee, was found shot in a parking lot of a Bellevue Inn on November 13, 2021, and was taken to a local hospital where she later died. The killer stole her car. So again, this is a case where it seems like, a crime is in commission and, a murder takes place. So I don't have reason to believe that this is because the person's trans. Chris Belher is number 44. This is the 44th murder, so we're almost there. A 65-year-old Kentucky woman who was stabbed and shot to death in May has been identified as transgender. Belher was killed May 19th in a residence in Florida and unincorporated area. This person was killed by Tyler Petty, 18 years old, is charged with the murder. And it is believed that Tyler is the person who worked with her. So Chris Belher is a 65-year-old trans woman. And the person charged with her murder is Tyler Petty, an 18-year-old, okay, who they believe had some personal relationship with her and they worked together, or he worked for her. So not because trans. Black transgender woman Nakia David was shot to death early Friday in Oakland, California. okay? And they don't provide much context, all right? But I said it was because it was trans. So, that's pretty much all of the crimes, all right? If you notice, there's no context, there's no proof that the people are killed because they're trans, all right? And that's 50, all right? So if you do the math, all right, there's 1.4 million trans people in the United States, okay? 1.4 million. And there's around 333 million just people in general in the U.S. population. 250 million of those people are adults, okay? And around 2019 and 2020, there were around 20,000 homicides in the United States. So based on the numbers, it's like you're more likely to be murdered if you're cisgendered than if you're transgendered. All right. Something like, you know, for every one, for every like 16,000 or 17,000 trans people, or was it 25,000? Something like that. I'll post the numbers. There's a homicide. But for every cisgender person, it's like for every 12,500 or every 17,000, something like that, there's a homicide. All right. So I don't see the big, crisis that they're trying to push. It's an agenda. You never see them break down the statistics of these homicides. You never see them break down the context behind the homicide. They just say trans people are being murdered and they try to push this agenda on us. Okay. So I felt that it was important for me to break this down. Please like, comment, subscribe, share the video. Let me know what your thoughts are. Peace out.